That sound. That's the sound of every single person on the street turning to look right at you. If you're an introvert like me, that's the last thing you want when you're shooting out there on the street. You actually want to blend in and capture moments without you being the main event. And a camera can feel like you're actually on the spotlight. But the good thing is that it doesn't have to be like that. So today I'm gonna rank 5 popular cameras or types of cameras for street photography, but not necessarily on the quality or tech specs. But actually I'll be ranking them on intimidating factors, from the most attention-grabbing and anxiety-inducing camera all the way to the undisputed king of discreet street photography. So let's start. Coming in hot on number 5, we have the most intimidating type of camera, and that is the full-frame mirrorless type of camera. And I'm talking about the big guns here, the Sony A series, the Nikon CF or the Canon R series. And don't get me wrong, these cameras are technically amazing. The quality is gorgeous, they can pretty much see in the dark, and the autofocus is faster than you can blink. But the reason I have them at the bottom of the list is that for an introvert, this type of cameras can be a bit of a social liability. The whole point comes down to 2 things. First of all, the size. Even the smaller full-frame bodies, once you pop a quality lens in, are big and stick out. And I'm talking about small full-frame bodies such as the AC2 from Sony, for example, which is as small as an APS-C camera, but with a big lens, doesn't really matter. And we'll talk more about APS-C cameras later today, so stay tuned. But in short, there's no hiding it. The second you put the camera in your eye, you're sending a signal to everyone around, and that is, I'm a serious photographer. And hell, you may be a serious photographer. If that's the case, props to you. But if you're a seriously shy photographer, you may not want to be sending that signal unless you're maybe at a professional photo shoot with a client, where maybe you do want to be sending that signal, but that's a separate scenario. The second point is the whole operation of the camera itself. And this is a point in which there are some pros for introverted street photographers, because these cameras tend to have all the bells and whistles in terms of technology and functionalities that brands have to offer, such as silent shutters, for example, or the possibility of adding a quality zoom lens. In that regard, you may think that the zoom lens can give you a sneaky distance, but in reality, it can also feel it like you are on a surveillance mission, which in my opinion can sometimes feel even more intimidating than when you're using a smaller, wider lens. Now, coming back to the pros, these are obvious. You're gonna get the best image possible, but for a shy shooter, the size is actually the deal breaker. These types of cameras are impossible to ignore, and they are a tool that screams for attention. So if you're even planning to start street photography with this, I would say it's like starting a video game in hard mode. So let's move on to the next one, and let's see what's the next best thing in my opinion. And for number 4, I have a high performance APS-C camera, and the model that I use for years is the Sony a6700. In fact, I'm shooting this with a Sony a6700. Before this, I had the Sony a6500, which compared to a full frame camera is kind of a step in the right direction if you're a bit on the introverted side, but there's a catch. First of all, let's talk about the good stuff. The a6700 is a photography beast that is packed into a much smaller body than the camera I just talked about, and one of the best features of this camera, compared to the ones that I'm going to talk about even later, is the AI autofocus. Sony can just not be beaten when it comes to autofocus, because you can literally tell it to track a person's eye and it will lock onto it with terrifying precision, even when that person turns around and you cannot even see the eye, which is crazy. All of this is incredible for candid shots, of course, because you cannot even have to mess with the focus points anymore, or at least it feels like it. You just need to trust the camera to do the work. And to be honest, at first I struggled itself with trusting the camera, but now I think I trust too much, because every time I use other cameras that don't have the amazing autofocus that this one does, I feel like I went back in time. This camera also has a great silent electronic shutter, but in my experience, this is both a pro and a con, because on the one side, yes, your shutter doesn't make any noise, but on the other hand, there is so much rolling shutter, and many times also lots of bending. The decision that I took was to not use the silent shutter with this camera for the reasons that I just mentioned. But now to answer a few questions that are probably in your head. If this camera is so good, why is it still at number 4? And well, I have to talk about the intimidating factor, because it connects to the shutter problem that I just mentioned. Because yes, since it has that silent shutter, you may think it's great, but since you want to avoid bending, you probably won't use it like me, otherwise you will end up with unusable pictures, which I've had. All of this defeats the purpose of having a silent shutter. So people will hear it, and of course you will come back to the center of attention. Plus, a con from the previous type of camera also makes an appearance here, and that is that it is an interchangeable lens camera, and that is great for versatility, but of course it adds bulk, especially if you want to use a quality lens. Which, by the way, if you're looking for one that's good for pretty much everything, but of course it's on the big side, you can have a look at the Sigma 17-40, which I'm shooting this with, and I've used it many times. I've done a video about it, you can check it over here. But coming back to the camera, as soon as you put a lens on it, even if it's a small one, it becomes something that you can just forget about. It looks just like a real camera, and that can make you visible on the street. You can minimize this to an extent using a pancake lens from Sony, for example, like the 20mm, which by the way you can buy by going to the QR code here or using the link in the description. All of these are affiliate links that help the channel, so thank you very much if you do. But nonetheless, the camera is still big, and for that size of camera, I think that you can get better quality with other options. And don't get me wrong, the A6700 is an amazing tool, I really love mine, but it is, especially if your top priority is nailing focus, which I do see being something important in street photography. But the mechanical shutter and the bulk in general means that it's not quite that discreet, so it may not be your best friend if you're an anxious photographer. For my number 3 spot, I have a camera that's absolutely adored by the street photography community, and that is for a very good reason. That is the FujiFilm X106. This can be controversial because lots of people have it as their number 1. Basically because for a lot of people, this camera is a perfect mix of style, power, and discretion. Its retro rangefinder design is just beautiful. But most importantly, it looks friendly. Although sometimes, actually, it can catch a little bit more attention than I wanted, because people have approached me on the street and asked me, hey, is that FujiFilm camera? Or hey, is this a film camera? Things that are nice to hear, but as an introverted photographer, you don't necessarily want to be catching all of that attention, as I mentioned. On the practical side, it has everything a street photographer could ask for because it has an incredibly quiet leaf shutter. So even if it's not completely on silent, it doesn't make a lot of noise, which is great. And it has a fantastic 35mm equivalent fixed lens, which is a classic for street work, but on the other hand, it wasn't something I was super comfortable with in the beginning, but I got used to it after a few trips with the camera. And of course, we cannot avoid the famous built-in simulations that give amazing images right out of the camera, which means less time editing and more time out there shooting. And by the way, if you're editing your pictures and you want to optimize the time that you take doing this, then you can have a look at the video over here, where I talk about ways in which your editing can be a bit more enjoyable part of the process. But now, why is this not number 1? It's sitting comfortably in the middle. Well, honestly, it's because of its size. While it is a smaller camera than the other cameras that I've listed so far, the X106 isn't truly pocketable. Some people like to call it pocketable, but I truly don't know the size of those people's pockets, because these are certainly not normal people's pockets. Because you cannot just slide it in your jeans, for example. It really needs a jacket or ideally a small bag, because I'm even doubting if the jacket option is a good option. So pocketable, not really. Not in my opinion. I actually prefer to use it with a strap or in a small bag, as I mentioned. What all of this means is that it is a conscious thing that you need to be carrying, which will make it visible. And while it looks a bit disarming, it's anyway a camera that you're hanging around your neck. So the X106 is a brilliant camera, and for a lot of introverts, the perfect sweet spot, because it's approachable, it's beautiful, and it makes you want to go shoot. And that is sometimes even more important than the camera being discreet, because since I got mine, I actually just enjoy shooting way more than I did before. It's a huge leap in discretion compared to the one that I just talked about, but it is not quite invisible. So what's the top spot? But before we hit the top 2 spots, which are the cameras that I think are absolutely the best for anxiety-free photography, if you're finding this video useful, do me a quick favor and like and subscribe. I'm always looking at how gear can help us get over our creative fears and improve our creativity and do it in a more efficient way. So let me know in the comments, which of the camera do you think is going to be number 1? Do you disagree with any of my options so far? I'm really curious. Coming in at number 2 is a camera that earned a legendary cult status among street photographers for one simple reason. It was born on the streets. And I'm talking about the Ricoh GR series, specifically the GR3 and the GR4 with all of their variants, mainly because I haven't used previous versions of the GR series. In terms of looks, it's quite simple. All of these cameras actually look exactly the same if you squint your eyes a little bit, so they are all good for street photography because they are very small, more on that later. But by the way, if you don't know which one to get, you can have a look at the video over here, because I did an analysis and compared the 3 versus the 4, and you would be surprised about which one to actually get. For this list, this is where everything actually changes, because we cross a critical line from camera that you can carry to an actual camera that you can pocket. And I'm talking about normal people's pocket in this case, because the GRs are so small and light that you can actually just slip it in your front pocket and literally forget it's there. This is great for street photography and for travel photography, because a camera in your pocket is infinitely more discreet than the one on the strap, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a camera in your pocket all the time, because otherwise which pictures are you taking, right? But what all of this means is that you don't have to be carrying more gear when you're going out there on the street. Again, as I mentioned, when you're traveling, where you probably want to keep it light. When you see a moment with this camera, you can just put it out, take a shot, and put it back in your pocket before anyone notices. And I do want to make a little bit of a parenthesis here, because the fact that you want to be discreet doesn't mean that you should be a creep. I've said it before in other videos, so don't be a creep. If people confront you, just be open about what you're doing. Which reminds me about another video that I did about confrontation in street photography, which you can check over here if you're interested. Now let's go into the intimidating factor of this camera, which is pretty much zero, because most people look at it the way they would look at a simple point and shoot. It doesn't look expensive or pro at all, which can be a con if you want to be flashy about your stuff, but I'm assuming you don't. What people don't know is that hiding inside this tiny body there is a huge APS-C sensor, which is the same size that you may find in the Sony a6700, for example, with an unbelievably sharp fixed lens. But in my opinion and in my experience, because I've used the GR3 pretty much since it came out, its actual secret weapon is snap focus. This little thing lets you preset a focus distance, for example 2 meters, and then when you fully press the shutter, the camera instantly snaps into that distance. So you don't need to focus manually or wait for autofocus and possibly miss the shot. You just need to make sure you are about 2 meters distance from your subject in that example, and then you will get an immediate picture. This specific feature teaches you how to capture moments without lifting your camera to your eye and how to judge the distance, because these are the kind of things that are very important when you want to capture candid moments. But now, same question, why is this camera not number one? And that is that the fixed lens can be limited to some people, and on the other hand, that in my experience the autofocus hasn't been the best in low light, so I've relied more on the snap focus. Plus, there's no viewfinder, which for a specific style of shooter may be a big con. Nonetheless, it's almost a perfect camera as it is. So on the introverted scale, I would rank it at 9.5 out of 10, for example. But there is one more option that will make you even more invisible, so let's have a look. This brings me to number one. The undisputed king of discreet, anxiety-free shooting is your phone. And yeah, it may feel and sound boring, and you're probably rolling your eyes right now, but hear me out. Think about the core problem that you're trying to solve here, the fear of getting noticed. What is the one camera that every person on the street already has, and that nobody has ever questioned, and that lets you blend into the crowd perfectly? It's your phone. If you think about it, you can stand on a corner, hold the phone on, everyone will assume that you're just texting, checking Google Maps, or even taking a selfie. Nobody thinks photographer. You are pretty much invisible. And this is the ultimate superpower for an introvert, because the social anxiety barrier is just gone. And on the other hand, your phone is also always with you and completely silent, unless you're in Japan, and using it draws zero attention. A pro tip here is that if you're using cable earbuds, which I know not a lot of people are nowadays, when you click the middle button of the control of your earbuds, a picture will be taken. Therefore, you won't even have to take a picture by pressing on the screen. And by the way, for this tip, I'm talking about an iPhone. I don't know if it works exactly the same for Android. I also made a deep dive about the settings on an iPhone, which you can check over here. Overall, smartphones have ridiculously capable cameras. The image quality in good light is great, the autofocus is instant, and the computer magic that's happening behind the scenes can pull off some incredible shots that can also prevent you from going and editing. Plus, you have flexibility because you have different lenses like the wide, the ultra wide, and even the short telephoto lens in some cases of phones, which give you, as I said, flexibility, versatility. On the other hand, the con is, of course, that the image quality will not be as good as with a camera with a bigger sensor, but this is a trade-off. Additionally, of course, you don't have the satisfying feel of the rear dial buttons, and the experience is basically holding a flat slab of glass, which may not be what you're looking for if you're getting into photography. But this video is not about finding the camera with the absolute best image quality, so keep that in mind. It's about finding the camera that actually empowers a shy person to go out there and take pictures, and I think your phone is the best camera for that. Now, as an introvert, if you already picked your camera, then the next step is going out and taking pictures. And the next step after that is actually publishing those pictures, because I'm assuming you want to have a place where people can enjoy it, or at least a place where you can enjoy your art being out there in the world. But that also can be very, very tricky because of the fear of what people may think when you publish your stuff. Negative comments, and even worse, no comments at all, are sometimes in our head. If that's something that's on your mind, then you can have a look at the video that's over here, where I talk about what happens when you're afraid of getting negative comments when publishing your stuff out there. So, see you there. Main gun, why did I write that? I'm constantly... This list, this is where actually everybody